And a very good morning and welcome to you. This is Sean Lawler on Phoenix Rising on Phoenix FM. And I recently, about 3 or 4 months ago, I should say actually, I saw a video, and I'm going to have a guest on this morning, Ben Gilroy, who, the video that I seen a few months back regarding him basically challenging a sheriff in a farm. Without getting into the whole sort of reasoning behind it, I'd like to read you a very, very quick background for who People for Economic Justice are. Now, to start off, this is basically straight off the website. People for Economic Justice was founded in late 2011 by Ben Gilroy, John Squires, and a handful of other ordinary people on the ground. Ben Gilroy and the other co-founders were all facing negative equity and mortgage debt at the time, and could see no real way out from under the massive strain being applied on them from the banks that owed money to. People for Economic Justice is a non-profit and non-political organisation formed to support and educate ordinary people on their right to lawful challenge on the banking institutions. The same banking institutions, as is common knowledge, received a massive bailout overnight in September of 2011, which saves them from the brink of collapse. This bailout came as a direct expense of the Irish people. The banks have chosen to repay this assistance by forcing homeowners and business owners out onto the street, taking their possessions from them. This is done because the people's inability to pay back the debts they owe, or to pay back the debts they owe. The inability to do so, of course, stems directly from the bank bailout that sank the country. Okay, their aims is, and again we're going to get into this, is of the People for Economic, their aims is to lawfully challenge repossession of homes, to keep people in their homes, to lawfully challenge all financial debt, and to educate people in the lawful challenge of debt. And finally, to support people in difficult situations. Now, we're going to get to that in a minute, but the reason I have him on today, Ben recently forwarded a letter. The National Lottery are currently using a company called KPMG, who are basically being used as accountants or auditors for the National Lottery. Now, I'm just going to read out this letter, and then we're going to get Ben on to have a chat about this. Letter was sent to Mr. Dermot Griffin, the CEO of the National Lottery. Dear Sir, I would like to make it known to you that your organisation of the absolute disgust that people all over the country portray to us in regards to the National Lottery. The source of this comes from your decision to have KPMG as your advisors' accountants. I am not sure if you know, but KPMG are one of the most aggressive receivers in this country. There seems to be no reasoning with them, and I have personally attended meetings with their agents to try and come to some sort of reasonable solution that may be acceptable to the bank. I have always found them aggressive and not tuned into the desperation of the person or business that is failing. When I asked one of the agents at a meeting in KPMG head office about the duty of care, the business owner, his reply was, I don't give a toss about the duty or about my duty of care. I must say I was disgusted with his attitude. An audio recording of the meeting is available. KPMG are moving in on farms and businesses all over the country. With banking fraud, greed and deception rife, and the eventual forcing of good people of this state to bail out the very banks and bankers who now show no remorse, or their agents, KPMG, showing even less. It galls the Irish people to see them now involved with the lotto, which is largely recognised as doing good work. The Samaritans organisation have told the papers that helplines are under pressure. With massive volume of calls, they take one call every 5 seconds. Every 57 seconds, someone calls the Samaritans with suicidal feelings. The majority of callers are men in their 30s, and as the recession deepens, Ireland's suicide rate now stands at a shocking 600 deaths per year. And experts believe this figure is rising as the country experiences the pain of recession, a well-orchestrated recession, I might add. The National Suicide Research Foundation Director Paul Corrigan said the findings are are not a coincidence. There is clear evidence that the recession has impacted on the rate of suicidal behaviour in Ireland. I now ask on behalf of the people for economic justice to terminate all contact with these vultures who hover over the carcasses of dying businesses and their employers have helped poison and kill, while KPMG seem intent on finishing off the owners. Awaiting your reply, Ben Gilroy. Now, with that, before I get Ben on, I also have contacted the National Lottery, the press office, yesterday, and KPMG. I've sent them a letter as well, an email to the press office. Unfortunately, because I do want to keep things balanced, I asked them invited them to come on to obviously defend their position, and unfortunately, they haven't responded at all. So I'd just like to welcome Ben onto the programme this morning. Good morning, Ben.
Good, how are you?
Very well, actually. See, I'm running out of breath here. As
yeah, I'm sorry, it was a bit of a long-winded letter you had to read there.
But I wanted to give a context, Ben, for your people of economic justice. So for people that may not know, because I was even walking over with Alan, who helps sort of run the show here. He does the producing side, and he didn't know about you, and I was just telling him. So it's important kind of give that context. So that's why it was a wee bit longer than I would have liked.
Of course, yeah.
Just from your point of view at the minute, really what I'm looking for is what was the reason that prompted you to send that letter to the National Lottery?
Well, around the country, and when I mean like from Donegal to Cork, we have been, fighting is the wrong word, we've been challenging banks and receivers the length and breadth of the country, and the effect, like the personal effect that it has on people is heart-wrenching when you see it.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't see it. I have men coming up to me and they're threatening to shoot them when they come onto the farm and stuff. And one of these days it's going to happen. And, it's not just that, though. It's the family as well. I met a young man there. His father committed suicide. And he said to me that, he remembers his father crying on the phone several times to these banks saying, please don't come in, that we have a viable business and we can get ourselves out of the trouble.
Yeah.
And of course, at the 11th hour, they didn't do it, and the father committed suicide.
Yeah.
Now, the young man is quite an intelligent, articulate guy, and he said he wanted to go in and see the bank.
Yeah.
And of course, there was a typical cold corporate response, which I talk about with the lottery as well.
Yeah.
And the response from them was, there's no problem, but we want you to send in a spokesman for the family because we want emotions left outside the door.
Yeah.
And it's that thing that just sickens me. I mean, who are these people? I mean, we know it's a corporation, but somewhere in that corporation, there has to be someone with a bit of feeling.
Human beings, yeah.
Yeah, I think what we should have done was shown the same remorse to the banks. Yeah. I mean, our country was doing terrific before we were forced to bail out the bank. And I use the word forced to bail out because none of us decided to do that. And the government that went into power actually went in with promises of not one red cent more and this sort of stuff. And in fact, they're actually worse than Fianna Fáil. Yeah. I mean, I know that's you'd nearly be hung, drawn and quartered for saying that, but I think Fianna Fáil would be better back in. I'm brave, haven't I?
I tell you, I bet you would never have thought you'd have said that maybe a few months or a year back before all this.
Imagine that's how far we've come now, that we're nearly saying, please, Fianna Fáil, come back in.
Again, I was thinking about this, Ben, and I was trying to draw an analogy, and the analogy, when I read the letter that you sent in regards to suicide, about 600 deaths, right? The analogy that I drew was, I'm thinking back, because obviously I'm from the north, you may have noticed.
I got that fine.
but with that, I remember John Hume, he said a speech in Parliament. This was kind of the kickstart he pretty much ended the SDLP party. But he stood up and he says, if the same number of people had been murdered or killed, as acts of whatever, in any other part of England or whatever. Yeah. He said there would be a national emergency. Yeah. There would be resources. There would be, it wouldn't even be nothing. No expense would ever be sorted. Yeah. And then when you pull that, who within the realm of 600 lives in this country is there anyone that you know in the political realm that you may have come in contact with that is challenging or raising this as an issue?
No, no one. I have said it to obviously a number of people, and no one has done it. And I was shocked by the reply I got from the lotto. And in fairness to the guy, he was the financial controller or something. I don't know how it actually fell on his lap to reply.
Would you like to read out the response?
Sorry?
Would you like to read out the response, or a second? I have it here. I can read it out if you like.
Yeah,
I'm prepared for the first time.
That's what I call professionalism in radio.
Okay, well, this is the response that Ben got back. I'll just read it out. Okay, dear Mr. Gilroy, thank you for your recent correspondence in relation to the National Lottery's independent auditors, KPMG. The company KPMG are appointed as independent auditors for the National Lottery through a public procurement process. In accordance with the public procurement guidelines, the invitation to tender for this contract were advertised to etenders.gov.ie. It was open to interested auditing companies in the European Union. KPMG was selected as the most economically advantageous tender of those received. The National Lottery has entered into a contract with KPMG for its services. Our relationships with all our suppliers are governed by contractual terms. KPMG has consistently met all of their contractual obligations to the National Lottery. I understand from your letter that you are dissatisfied with your dealings with KPMG and would suggest that you contact KPMG directly to convey your concerns. Yours sincerely, Declan Harrington, Head of Finance. Now, like you said, there was absolutely no heart or no addressing what you said.
And you see, the problem with that is, like, the way I look at the Lotto is, they do a lot of good work around the country. They support different sporting organisations and stuff. And they're a bit like a rehab group, is my understanding of it.
Yeah.
And it's a bit like Bernardo's telling you basically that, I won't use bad language, but basically to, get on with your business with parents of children on the street.
Yeah.
It has that sort of ring to it.
Well,
I'll tell you, I'll give you a break and I'll read the reply because I have it here in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
So I just said, Dear Declan, thank you for your prompt reply. I must say that it was quite a cold corporate response to what was a true human tragic concern of one of the causes of suicide. I was a bit disappointed that Mr. Griffin, to whom the letter was addressed, couldn't take time to reply to the concerns raised by the many people around the country. Declan, as Head of Finance, I'm not really sure why the grave concerns of a growing number of discontented people around the country should have fallen in your remit. While I don't want to seem ungrateful for a reply, I wasn't asking anything about your finances.
Mm-hmm.
Your letter describes the way one tenders for the position that KPMG now hold. My letter merely complained of who they are and the practices they conduct around the country. The letter states that you have a contract with KPMG and they meet their contractual obligations.
Mm-hmm.
The inference is taken that once they do what they are paid to do, it is of no concern to your company what they do or how they act to your customers the length and breadth of the country. I am reminded of the legal maxim which states, he who contracts knows, or ought to know, the quality of the person with whom he contracts, otherwise he is not excusable.
Mm.
Perhaps in the future your company will choose more wisely when contracting with companies like KPMG and won't only consider the most economically advantageous company, because in the long run they may turn out to be the most costly for us all.
I think again in the fact, and the word that springs for me is integrity.
Yeah.
Because if something's not integral in their dealings with their business, that obviously has an effect.
Of course, yeah.
It cannot be avoided. But so I can move just to one other thing, just for them, or not another thing. But KPMG, who are they?
They're a big multinational auditing company who are also acting as receivers. So that's basically who they are. They're basically a big American company, but they franchise out, and their headquarters are there just off Stephen's Green in Dublin.
Well, I have something here that you might be able to comment on. I went to their website and I looked at their values. I don't know why you've looked at this, Ben, by any chance.
No, I can imagine what PR nonsense.
I'll just want to read it out because we do need a context to look at this, because as if somebody is putting this into the public domain, then this is what they say they are. Our values as KPMG, our values create a sense of shared identity within KPMG, defining that we stand or what we stand for and how we do things. KPMG values help to work together to bind us closer as a global organisation. we lead by example at all levels, and we act in a way that exemplifies what we expect of each other and of our clients. We work together, we bring out the best in each other, and create strong and successful working relationships. Now, I could go on, Ben, but I think you're getting...
Yeah.
That doesn't seem to be
lead by example. So at least they're not following anybody else's example, but they're suggesting that all other companies follow their lead.
Yeah. Well, there certainly seems... I'm not going to get I went to the next part, because this is kind of really key for me, is they said our culture. The culture was about 5 sentences long compared with our values. Now, that really kind of just screamed to me the context in which they are presenting themselves. And I would really, again, invite them on here now if they wish. And also like to invite anybody in Blanchardstown here, because this does affect the community in every level. And if they would like to come on, it's 085 10 50 181. If you'd like even a question for yourself as well, maybe. Yeah. But there's one thing I'd like to just go into. You said here in your letter, in the original letter, a thing called, you quoted, a well-orchestrated recession, I might add. Could you go into a little bit more depth on that, Ben?
Yeah, well, the way I look at this, I think this is the biggest asset and land grab probably in history. I firmly believe the banks know the euro is failing, if it hasn't already failed, and that they want to come after the real asset. So it's very easy to orchestrate that when you're in the banks.
Yeah.
First of all, you bring in what's called securitization, which is the selling of the mortgages on the stock exchange. And then what you do is you inflate the price. Now, I know people might think, oh, this is crazy what you're talking about, but I've seen it at first hand. I mean, I have several documents here. I have one here from ACC Bank, a compliment slip written in a bank manager's handwriting. And it says to this guy, I won't mention his name, but it basically says, Mr. So-and-so, your valuer has come in with a value of $825,000 for the property. As you know, you have been approved for $925,000, and it is a condition of our loan that you take the full amount. Please speak to your valuer. So there's just 100,000. Now, he came back with the valuer because he wanted to get the loan, and there's just another 100,000 euro thrown at him. Now, 100,000 euro.
The question I kind of want to get to is, right, I'm a guy just sitting in my house here now. Somebody may be listening to this, right? And I've got concern. What practical things can I start to do for me or my family, or to actually empower or help me challenge things in this realm?
Education, I think, is really the key. There's a lot of good websites out there, including our own, which will try and help. And if you have questions, we try to answer them as best we can, and we can email documents.
Would you like to highlight the name of that now again, just to make it clear?
Yeah, People for Economic Justice. And basically, you can ask questions on the forum or get in touch or stuff like that, and we will try to help people in all aspects, because there's people at home, as you say, like terrified of a knock on the door and stuff like that. Yep. And it's that where we're trying to help, because, like the banks got bailed out during the night. I remember I was on one radio show and a guy says to me, oh, well, Ben, this can't be sorted in a day, it's going to take a long time. And I said, well, the bank got sorted a couple of hours during the night.
Well, but you see, again, I'll just give you my take on it, and then you can comment on it. But there, in response to you were saying about the euro failing and the biggest land grab, you might say. But underneath all it, it's all, I suppose, around perception.
Of course.
And the perception, and I find a lot, even when I go up home, I talk to them, it'll never change. It'll never. Yeah. You maybe hear that a lot. Yeah,
I do. The only thing is, I think when you eventually back enough people into a corner, they have to wake up and fight, or maybe fight's the wrong word, but stand up for their rights. Like the government in this country are only the trustees of the state, if you like. Yeah. We're supposed to be the beneficiaries. Yeah. How often do we feel like beneficiaries of the state?
Yeah. Well, again, I just want to highlight this while it's in my head before we go for a little bit of music. It's because we did obviously refer to suicide, and if there is anybody out there at the moment that is a bit concerned regarding what's going on, I have a number here even in the Blanchardstown area. If you'd like to call it, it's 01832 6115. It's for coping with suicide. You can ring that number locally in Blanchardstown. Just wish to have, because there is that desperation in a lot of people. And
there is. I don't know if anybody's seen the video we put up on YouTube where the sheriff broke into a house and the guy was taking a heart attack on the floor.
I haven't seen that, no.
Okay, well, we just heard the sad news yesterday that his sister was in financial trouble and she took her own life yesterday. So condolences to her family.
Oh my goodness me! Well, we have just witnessed evidence that of this, because now, for those that know me, Ben, because I have had a girl recently on called Joanne Featherstone, who put a video up regarding suicide, and her family made a video. It's actually getting quite a few hits now as well.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, we're going to go for a bit of music, and just with this is called Becoming the Jackal by Villagers. But again, are you back there, Ben?
Yeah, I am, yeah.
And it's really important that I say this, because I suppose one of the main things that keeps coming around is to educate yourself, and don't even take your word for it. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. But, you don't want to do that.
But because these are companies, and behind that, and I suppose is a key thing. KPMG, go onto the website, check about who they are, what they say they do, and then measure it. In your own respects. And the same with the National Lottery. But the key thing here is accountability and responsibility. Or who would you state that from your side of things, Ben?
Who's responsible?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the responsibility has to lie with, first of all the institutions that have us in the mess we're in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it started, I suppose, with the Law Society, really, because they had solicitors signing these mortgage contracts for people, and were supposed to be giving good legal independent advice to the person.
Yeah.
In most cases, you'll see that there was actually a huge conflict of interest, because your solicitor was also the bank solicitor. A lot of people don't know that. So there's a huge conflict of interest. Mm-hmm. Now, I spoke to a solicitor who'd been a solicitor for many years. He's retired now. And I asked him about securitization. And he said to me, I've never heard of the word before, Ben. Right. And I said, well, it's on every loan agreement with mortgages that I've seen for the last 15 years. And he said, that may very well be, Ben, but he said, if you think solicitors know everything that's in an agreement from a bank, he said, you're on a hiding to nothing.
Yep. He
said, we're told to sign here, register the proper folio numbers down at the land registry and return everything to the bank.
Yep.
And that's it. Now, I mean, because I've studied banking fraud and securitization always leads us to the mess we're in. Always. Okay? Because what happens is that when everybody who should have got a mortgage gets a mortgage, there's such pressure put on brokers to get more mortgages sold, because you have investors now involved in it as well. Mm-hmm. And they're pressurising the bank to get more mortgages out there, that they then start doing the subprime.
Yeah.
And once you do the subprime, now you're on a hiding to nothing. Now, once one or two default, it's not so bad. Their houses get repossessed and they get sold. But then, of course, it becomes a glut. And the house that you bought for 100,000 is now worth 200,000, but you're still being asked to pay the same amount of money. Yeah. Now, when securitization always ends up with that mess, who put you on the road to that? So that's why I say it starts with the Law Society. The banks are more than culpable. The brokers, the valuers who came out and valued, because you had valuers, say like that honest valuer I spoke about at the start of the show there with the who probably gave a fairly honest valuation of the 800,000 and was told to come back with 900,000. If he doesn't do that, he's out of work, because nobody's going to use him again. You see, so when you're working as a valuer for a bank, they're basically told, go out and just come up with the most ridiculous price that you think somebody will believe.
Yeah.
And
now that's the responsibility. So from our own point of view, I suppose the accountability must lie with ourselves being educated.
Yes, of course. But you see, also, when you have, at the time, Bertie Ahern was the CEO, if you like, of our corporation, and as such, he was advising us. And people put their trust in government. Yeah. And so I remember at the time that he was hauled over the coals about somebody committing suicide, because people were telling him in the know, this bubble is going to burst.
Yeah.
And he was saying to him, look, why don't you go away and commit suicide? I don't know if you remember that.
I do remember hearing.
And he got into trouble about it. But the fact is that, people don't want to educate themselves about banking, because, look, it's an absolute snore fest. I had to do it. And I'm telling you, no, there's no better way of putting your children to sleep than just read a few paragraphs of some banking book.
Yeah.
And it's designed that way.
Yeah.
It really is designed that way. So that's kind of hard to do. And so you put your trust in government, because you say, well, we'll vote these people in. So the advice from government was, you better yourselves and get on the property ladder now and all this sort of stuff. And now, of course, when the proverbial has hit the fan, it's all, oh, we were greedy and we overstepped our mark. No, we didn't. And then we're talking about, like, when it comes to people in the state, it's always, they talk about debt forgiveness.
Yeah.
Like, we have to be forgiven for something. But when it comes to the bank, it was recapitalisation.
New language.
Well, it's all tricks of words. In other words, if we look for forgiveness, so we must be doing something wrong. Where if they look for recapitalisation, well, that's sort of business term.
well, see, I can use my perception as a yardstick, right, to where I am in regards to, I obviously have a young family, and because my missus is actually working in the educational system and has a full-time job, I'm entitled to absolutely zero on that one. And we're
me too.
And we're currently 3 years behind on our mortgage. We haven't paid. Now, nobody's knocked on the door, and there's probably a very good reason why they haven't knocked on the door at this stage, because they're trying to get all the big fish first, but they will most likely come eventually. And that's, again, my perception, so I can honestly state that. But where I want to go is, this here is on your website, and I just want to concentrate on it a minute. It says along the top here, and again, maybe you can go into a little bit more detail. The dwelling, and this is on the Constitution, by the way. The dwelling of every citizen is inviolable and shall not be forcibly entered, save in accordance with law.
Yeah.
Could you give me a little bit of an explanation of what that means?
Okay. Our forefathers were used to, a time in history when, the British, I won't say people, I mean, British people are lovely, but the British, system was here basically dragging people from their homes and burning out homes and stuff like that, and evictions were rife. So they put that little proviso in our Constitution that, when you're in your home, it's inviolable. So, in other words, it will not be entered into forcibly by anyone. And that's enshrined in our Constitution. But, like, how many people actually learn their Constitution in school? I mean, I was only taught in school that we had one. I wasn't taught what was in it or what it was about. And it's a very good document that, we have some protection there, because, like, all these banks all go back to the City of London. Every one of the banks that we have, like even Bank of Ireland, don't be tricked by the name. It's actually Bank of England. Yeah. And, that's why I say carefully orchestrated asset grab, because that's what's taking place. Oh, well, and
again, I'm a big fan, I think I discussed with you already, of Max Egan, who was currently here, and I really would reiterate what he says. And by the way, Max Egan is a guy who has a radio show that he broadcasts from Australia, from his home, and he's currently doing a farewell tour, you might say, or whatever.
Yeah, I met up with him there recently. He's a good guy.
Amazing character in the sense that, and this is the statement he says: when the government is in breach of trust now, that statement in itself.
Of course.
If they are in breach of trust, now I have no evidence. I can only stand for my viewpoint is the human experience is becoming an economic or a monetary value. Yeah. And
well, sorry to cut across here. Yeah. He's quite correct in what he says, and that's why I spoke about that earlier. That they are the trustees. Now, for most people that don't know, like in the state, or that we get the word state from, our state, is you would only have maybe executors, and then you'd have trustees and you have beneficiaries. And they're the trustee or executors of the state, but we are the beneficiaries. Yeah. And that's why I said to people, how many of us feel like beneficiaries? 1 in 5 mortgages now are in serious arrears, okay? And in the other ones, the people are just struggling in a rat race, and that's not life either. You don't feel like a beneficiary, you
existing.
feel like a slave.
We're existing, we're not living.
Exactly, and there's a huge difference. And that's why people, the suicide rate is so high, because the existing rather than living, sometimes, you see then suicide as an option, and that's what the problem is.
Well, I'm going to take another quick song here. It's very short, and when we come back, what I'd like to do, man, is you focus on solutions.
Yeah,
and see what we can come up with suggestions and what may start to erode the current paradigm. This is Be Yourself by Jerry Bug and the Mud. I can't even say it. Be Yourself. And that is Be Yourself by Jerry Fish and the Mud Bug Club. I got it right this time. Great song, and a lot of wisdom in those words, and a good band from our first island of Ireland. Okay, Ben, we're back. Solutions, Ben. Solutions. Now,
we all know what's wrong now, so I think solutions is a good place to start.
Yeah, and
obviously the solution is going to start depending on where you are.
Yeah. Well, let me put it this way: if we be honest, I think really all this debate. There's a lot of debate around it, and what you might say describing the furniture. Yeah.
Yeah.
Of a room, or how a room is decorated, instead of actually looking at the foundations. And I think from the foundations side of things, where I see it, is what needs if the system is corrupt and it's all this stuff. How do we uproot the foundations? You might say, and what's what can we practically do as people to help achieve that?
Okay. Because I've been looking at this for a number of years, we tried loads of different stuff. I suppose that would be the first thing you would do would be, fight the sheriff head on and fight receivers head on and stuff like that. But we realised we're only putting out fires. While we're sitting in a place when keeping the sheriff out, he's taking 10 more places down the road.
Yeah.
We realised we're only putting out fires. And unfortunately, politics has become, you see, there's nothing wrong with politics per se. And we need politics. I mean, everything is governed by politics. Even when you go buy an apple, it's governed by politics. So we need politics. The problem is when you have corruption, cronyism, self-help groups helping themselves. I mean, when it becomes tainted with that, and corporate friends getting into government pockets and putting the will of the people second to the corporate body, now you have a problem with politics.
Well, does it start here, perhaps, Ben? And this is something I'm a big advocate of as well. Does it start with being honest where you are, just where your position is in life, and where you live, and who lives around you? Yeah. Does it perhaps start there?
It does. I mean, it does. It starts with just helping your fellow man, and I've had people at the start of this ringing me, and they'd be saying to me things like, "Ben, I'm not going to pay your mortgage."
Yeah.
Now, I mean, this was just so nonsense. I mean, I felt sorry for the guy because that's where he was. I was saying, look, I've never asked anybody to pay my mortgage.
Yeah.
I've never asked anybody for anything. Yeah. And as you say, I was self-employed for the last 30-odd years in this country. And, the minute I find myself out of work, the state gives me nothing.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I have 3 young kids here.
Yeah.
And the state gives me nothing. Nor do I want anything from the state.
Yeah.
You see? But the point is that if we continue down the road we go, there's 5 mortgages in trouble. Okay, let's say they come and they evict me. Fine. I have a young family. The state have to provide, right? Because the family unit is the most protected in all society.
Yeah.
So I will know my rights. Now, when they give me a house, now that man who said that to me is paying my mortgage.
Yeah.
You see, that's the point. But not only is he paying my mortgage, he's paying now, I will have a medical card. God, won't I be delighted to have one of them.
Yeah.
So he'll be paying that. He'll probably pay my ESB, my gas, everything else, because then I will turn into a sponger on society.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. I will probably then raise my kids as spongers to milk the system.
Yeah.
And are we going to do that with 1 in 5 houses now?
No.
So you look out your road now and look up and down the road and have a look and think, now every 5th mortgage is going to be put on yours. How do you feel about that now?
Yeah.
See, so let's not, throw stones because we're in the glass house. What we should do is look for solutions. So we've tried a number of things. The first thing we did was we had a look at how the country got into the mess. Now, our politicians always lie to us, and I know we say, oh, Ben, you're so naive to think they don't. I never thought they didn't. But at some stage we have to say, look, enough is enough.
Yeah.
When they were coming in, the Fianna Fáil government were definitely on their way out, and we knew it.
Yeah.
So nobody did anything because Fianna Fáil were there and they were coming with great promises. And only for that I believe we would have had riots on the streets.
Yeah.
But we were all sitting waiting because they were singing from the correct hymn sheet. And so it was only waiting until they were getting in. Like Fianna Fáil was the dead man, and we were just waiting until he died, and they were going to get in, and there would be new life in the country. And what they did was a complete U-turn. I mean, they were worse than Fianna Fáil. They're in over a year. They've done absolutely nothing except increase taxes, and they've put taxes onto basic human rights, like the basic human right to own a home, the basic human right to have water. They're taxing sewage tanks. these are basic human rights that they're actually taxing now.
Yeah, but
we have to attack that. So the first thing we did then was we launched a court case against the government, against the Taoiseach and the Minister for Finance. And what we're trying to do is, if we're ready, that is, when they are announcing that they're paying the next set of money back to bondholders, we are going to get an injunction or go look for an injunction in court to stop that.
Right.
Because we have a very strong case here. Basically, I'll just read a little bit. This is just what's called the general endorsement of our claim. Now, we did get, we have this actually court case filed, and we served it on the government, and we have a letter back now from the Chief State Solicitor who are saying they want our full statement of claim soon. So we're working on that.
Yeah.
But one of the points in it is that the actions of an Taoiseach and Minister for Finance in paying back unsecured debts to private banks who took part in illegal activities is repugnant to the Constitution of Ireland.
Right.
Now, that's just a fact. There's no getting away from it. And I know you could say, well, we don't have anybody on in the interest of balance. But, I keep saying to people, look, there's only one truth. You may get two people on to argue about it, but there's still only one truth.
well, the truth is very, very clear. You've got 600 people in our country who now, not maybe all of them have taken their lives in regards to economic circumstances, but there certainly is a correlation. So that is a fact. It's not a conspiracy. It's not anything to dissuade that. And we have to look at these facts to bring about meaningful solutions. So where's your take on where you think, well, if this happens, this is an indication of things are starting to change? What would that be?
You see, it's very hard to know, because even when I do a talk, it's very hard to know in the room where people are at. I mean, some people just, are more interested in who's winning the X Factor, and they don't really know there's trouble outside. But for people in trouble, I would say do a little bit of research, come on our website and other websites and have a look, and the main thing is don't feel you're alone. Look, the biggest weapon that the banks have in this is the shame that people feel about not being able to pay their bills. But there can be very little shame if your government has sucked out the money out of the economy and given it to gamblers on the stock exchange.
Well, I put it to this is where really the guts of it is because how the system may be arranged, and it's a system. It's our system, and it's divisive in the sense that it divides people. Well,
you can see them starting to do that now with the private sector and the public sector, and it's all nonsense in the co-pact deal. That has nothing to do with any of this. The point is that we were fifth best in Europe before the government decided to bail out banks. Fifth best in Europe. We were doing very well, thank you.
Well, again, I'm an advocate of this one, and one of the first things that whoever is in your organisation, we need to get, as you say, foot soldiers, but ultimately we need to start to get to know who our neighbour is.
Yep.
We need to get to help educate. If there is somebody in your community that needs maybe a little help or are concerned, point them in the direction of this information, and again, let them be informed. That's something I think that would be...
of course. We have people around the country, and they sometimes say to me, Ben, we're after getting a group together of people in our neighbourhood or in our estate or whatever it might be, in our town of Blanchardstown or Wexford or whatever it might be, and they'll say, look, would you be able to come down and give a talk on a certain night? And we do that, and it's probably a good way of doing it, because then there's a sort of camaraderie, and we can have a bit of fun, and we laugh, and we talk about things we've done in court and stuff like that. And, once you get that feeling that you're not in this mess alone, it becomes like, the problem shared is problem half, and that's definitely true. Yeah. If you're in your community and you see like-minded people, because this sense of being alone and you're the only one and you're a failure because you can't pay your bills and stuff like this, once you get rid of that, you'll realise, hey, this is okay. And that's really, it's about the perception, and we're breaking up a little bit there. What I've seen, Ben, is... Are you there still? Oh, he's gone. Okay, well, I would say Ben has mysteriously disappeared. Hopefully, we might be able to get him back on before the end of the show. I believe you're back, Ben. Yeah. Powers to be there. We're trying to keep me off. It was a little bit concerning in the sense that with this...
kind of hissing. I thought you get sort of beamed up into a spaceship or something there at one point. I'm glad you're back with us anyway. Well, but just a few minutes left on the show. So, just from your side, your representative set up this this, you might say, organisation, People for Economic Justice. What would you basically say to if your brother, sister, whoever's out there needing some help or encouragement in their lives? What would your closing kind of statement be in that?
First of all, you have to be able to just protect yourself and your family, so education is the only way, and ask questions of the banks and ask to see all documents and stuff like that, On a national scale, we have set up a party now called Direct Democracy Ireland. Yeah. And while we've no desire for power, or we're not hungry for power or anything like that, what we are trying to do is to put back into the Constitution the right of referendum. That was removed from our first Constitution. And it's called direct democracy, is that way where you can call a referendum. Now, the reason that's very important, and that's why, once the first government seen that in the Constitution, they came up with excuses of why it should come out, and there was no referendum to take it out. Now, basically, in this country, we do not have the right to call a referendum. Yep. Okay, we used to have it. You used to be able to get 75,000 signatures, and you could call a referendum. Right. You also cannot take a class action. Okay, in this country, you can't take class action. So when we tried to find that out, I went to do a class action against the government, and I wasn't allowed because we were told it's not class action. And now in our court case, I know the first thing that we have to fight is the thing called locus standi, which basically means that do we have standing in the case? In other words, what they're going to tell us is it didn't affect me personally, it just affected the country. So you can see that the system is designed that you don't have a say. Yeah. And people think we have democracy in this country, and of course you don't. What you have is a vote, and there's a huge difference between having a vote and having a say. So what we want back in the Constitution is the right of referendum, among other things, but that would be the main thing. Because if you take the night of the bailout, okay, if we had direct democracy in place, I mean, I can imagine the phone call was probably something like this between Brian Cowen and Angela Merkel. It would have been something like, well, that's great, Angela, we'll bail you out, no problem. But unfortunately, in this country, we have direct democracy. And you know what them fuckers are going to do? They're going to call a referendum in a weekend. So you're going to have to come back with something better.
And what a protected.
It's a protection in the Constitution for us. Our forefathers were far clever, and we sometimes give them credibility for it because they had no iPads back then.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to have to kind of round up the show, but maybe you'll have some time to come into the show, into the studio, maybe someday when it's convenient.
Sure, that'd be great.
And we could maybe focus on something else or see how you're getting on. And thank you for coming on today and speaking and being so brave to obviously take on you might say, the great fight, the good fight, and may have success on behalf of...
Well, it's always an easy fight when you're right.
The truth, yeah? The truth. Well, all the very best to you, as I say, I'm sure I'll be speaking to you again in the near future.
No bother.
God bless. Bye.
No bother. Bye now.